Any questions, comments about either what Richard just said, the initiative in general, or some comments about what you're encountering? Yes, go ahead.
Well, comment first of all, I'm the chairman of the Department of Business Administration here, and you are at the right place if you object to schools that only focus on profit, because that is definitely not our focus here. We do a lot of not-for-profit work. We do a great deal of effort into excellence of product and concern for workforce. They are critical parts of our program. My question actually is about two things that seem to focus, that you seem to focus on, but they seem to be slightly different. You identified the study of civics as the study of the theory of governance, and then you later seem to refer to civics as civility. Can you bring the connection for me?
Sure. And once before, a graduate of Wharton raised his hand and said to me, "That's not true. What you're saying is not true. They actually teach what you say they don't teach." And I said, "And do you carry it into your career?" And he said, "Well, no." And I said, "Well, then, call it what you will."
I believe our students do. I believe it.
Then good health to them. And hopefully they'll be in positions of power. But I said to the head of the Wall Street Journal, "You don't want capitalism to prevail anywhere, anytime, but no matter who, no matter what. You want American capitalism to prevail, right?" And he said, "Right." I said, "Well, in 10 years, you're going to get your CEOs from India and Asia, because we're not feeding the public schools who feed Harvard, Yale, Andover, Shepherd." And that is what I mean. Our business community does not feel what it used to feel, a natural connection and responsibility for its neighbors and its fellow citizens. And people didn't wait for the government for everything. And now, left and right, all we do is wait for the government. And the business community used to lend a hand, create things that connected us. And now, if you said that at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, you'd be burned. If you said it at Rotary, they would hear you. But if you said it at Chamber of Commerce, business, we are the nation of business, has a responsibility not to allow its clients, its customer base, to be victimized by caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. And now, let the buyer beware is more common than it has ever been in this century. It is irrelevant to a business these days whether or not you have paid on time or it just got lost in the system. They're going to do unto you. They're not going to stand up and cheer for equitable, just behavior. Whether you buy a house, a mortgage, or in our case a car and a renovation, at every step of that, at every point of contact, there was first cheating, second lying, and grudgingly third paying off. This is not the way business has to be, and it's not the way it's been. When Dwight Eisenhower was president of the United States, there was a given in the community that we paid 90% in corporate tax rates in order to pay for the war we had just fought. Now we pay 37% and complain about it. And we get exactly the country we pay for. We get potholes that are driven over by the limousines of the Rockefellers and you, and no one pays for the infrastructure. And I've been puzzling about this for a while, because since we all use the infrastructure, why wouldn't they be willing to pay for it? Well, maybe it's because they live in the Emirates now. All I know is that there's no instinctive connection between business and its employees. And when people in the executive departments of various companies walk out on their lawn and simply say to their employees, "There's no more pension plan, we're ending it, goodbye," and he walks back without taking any questions, and everyone who's ever worked for that company is left hanging in midair. There's no sense of responsibility, no sense of authority. That's a mindset, and it's a mindset that we have to change.
To the other dimension on civics, our Civics Initiative and Richard's approach is really three-dimensional. The first one is looking at our founding principles, the founding documents, the founding fathers, and the founding context, which gets to the Enlightenment component. How does all that shape our environment every day? The second piece is civics, as Richard likes to say, is probably the most boring term in the English language. But if you reshape it as practical political power, in the exercise of practical political power, what that means is it's more than just that we have 3 branches of government and senators serve 6 years. It's how do we hold power accountable? What can you do when you go into a public hearing and recognize they're breaking the rules? What do you do to force adequate public notice and make sure there's true transparency out there? But then the third piece, which is really the heart of our curriculum, is what makes an effective adult and therefore an effective citizen, and that is logic and critical thinking and the ability to recognize opinion versus fact, and the ability to have debate and to respect other people's opinions but still vigorously defend yours, and many other components that undergird all the rest. I think you're going to speak a little more to that.
There's our founding fathers or framers or that generation wrote these documents, were suffused with the values of the Enlightenment, which were reason, clarity of thought, critical analysis, and used dissent and debate, civility and opposing views to strengthen the country. And we pride ourselves on using the variety, the strength that comes from variety of religion, of culture, that together make this democracy the strongest democracy in the world. We do not say this is one religion. We do not say that we don't have the courage to look at our own history, which has always befuddled me. Every nation in the world has a history. You don't lie to your kids about the history of your family, and you don't lie to your kids about the history of your nation. You learn from it, and you progress from it. And we actualized the idea that the citizen was actually the employer of the king. That the king, the nation wasn't built for the king's goodwill. It was built because the citizens needed a government, and they chose kingship. Now they chose the sovereignty of we, the people. But every sovereign in history has had a tutor. Alexander the Great was tutored by Aristotle. We, who have chosen the most complex and complicated of all theories of governance, have chosen not to have a tutor, unless you pick Rupert Murdoch, and I don't count Rupert Murdoch. But you have no source of understanding the complexity of your enemy, much less your own people, if you don't allow for acuteness of mind. And so these things, opposing views and dissent and debate, these are the things that hone the talents of the intellect. And you cannot do what they say in England about Colonel Blimp. You can't be a Colonel Blimp. You can't say, this is how this battle will be fought. All you can really say is, there's going to be a battle here, and you better be prepared for anything that happens. You can't predict the future and tie yourself to that promise and die by it, because things happen. And if you don't have agility of mind and agility of intellect, you're going to be taken by surprise and brought down. The nation, the people. So what we choose in this curriculum is to say that we are citizen-centric, student-centric. We are not legislation-centric, and we don't have a preordained idea of how things will come out. We want our kids to be smart enough to deal with whatever comes out. Because Osama bin Laden is not the last, only the first. And we have to be prepared for that. We have to be exercised and ready and prepped to go where history is leading us. And we have the right to say, no, that's not where history has to take us. It'll take us where we want it to. We have that right, and we have that power, if we choose to.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Coming from public high school and public elementary school, you're right. You're accurate to a T. I mean, it's all taught by the test. It wasn't until I moved to Shepherd and got my college education when I started to critically think. But my question is, what should students do? Because it's not just the educators that are going to have to educate the students. It's going to be the students themselves. So what are your recommendations for students to follow your principles?
There was a civics mission statement that said that we ought to back teachers when they bring controversial issues into the classroom. They said nothing about what would happen when the teacher was fired for bringing controversial issues into the classroom. What could students do? They could ask that their classes of current events reflect the current events that they're reading about in the newspaper. They can ask, why are we hearing so much about Britney Spears and not about the war in Iraq? We can ask questions and hone our curiosity. The profession of journalist actually has that as its mandate, to speak truth to power and ask those questions that might be considered rude is their job. It's the job of students to demand better from their teachers and better from their school districts, and to say, are there two wars going on, and why was there not a declaration of war, and why is there not oversight committees by the Senate and House, which are mandated by the Constitution? People may call us to follow the law, but when they break it so brazenly, it's pretty hard to sustain the argument. The students can ask for a more excellent training. And what I've asked for is that history teachers put on their walls a statement to be signed by all willing students. And that statement is, we want a more rigorous training in how to run the country before it's our turn to run the country. Because if we don't, someone else will run the country, and that's not been mandated by the Constitution. And we all know that we're being pickpocketed. Now, it's not even being hidden. They do it right in front of our face. Our schools are more important than almost any other, except perhaps for the research in medicine. We say in one sentence, we're the richest and best country in the world. We are the richest country in the history of the world. We can't afford to educate our kids. This is common senselessness right in front of you. And you have a right as a student, as a parent, as a teacher, as a superintendent, to stand up and say, wait a minute, let's get this lined up logically. We either are or aren't the richest country in the world. And if we are, what's more important than educating our children? And if there's something more important than that, please tell me what it is, because I don't know.
Another component to that is, a couple of weeks ago we celebrated the 41st anniversary of the first Earth Day. And the slogan from 1970 was think globally, act locally. And that's exactly what students and people should do to this day. We need to be aware of what happens in Iraq and Libya and what's going on in Japan and other things. But the actions we should take are local, because having been the Chief Administrative Officer of the House of Representatives, there is an imperviousness to Congress that is going to take generations to overcome. But you can affect, and if you go onto the streets and march against Afghanistan, you may be covered in the local Martinsburg Journal. You're not going to be covered by the Wall Street Journal. On the other hand, if those same activities or enthusiasm is put into electing your next town council in Shepherdstown, your next county commissioner, your next school board member, you're going to do several things. One, you're going to have a lot more impact per hour and per dollar affecting your local government than you are Washington, because you're going to always be outbid by the interest down there. The second is you begin to enrich the pipeline with the right kinds of people, because unless someone's a multimillionaire, a person who serves in Congress is someone who served in a county government first, or state legislature first, or on a school board first. So if you get the right people at the front end, now the 80-20 rule applies. 80% of those people, by the time they get their vote card in Congress, will have fallen off the moral and ethical wagon. It just is the law of averages that are against us. But at some point we might be able to notch up that 20% to 30%. And that 30% are even going to be stronger in their moral fiber and ethical orientation than the crowd there today. And that starts with the next school board election.